In the beginning of the first millennium BC, a state with a developed sedentary agricultural way of life emerged in Fergana Valley. In Chinese chronicles, they called it Davan. The origin of the name is associated with the ethnonym Tocharian, a strong nomadic tribe. The emergence of names Bohan and Polona are traced back to the 5th century AD. The latter term is the Chinese transcription of the word Fergana. The dynasty of local kings was ruling the state. Their power was strongly limited by the Council of Elders. This Council of Nobles was electing and removing kings, resolving questions of war and peace, as well as establishing and breaking off diplomatic relations with other countries. Rulers of separate towns also had to obey the decisions of the Council of Elders. Even before the emergence of the Great Silk Road, the population of Fergana lived in an important region with the rudiments of trade relations between East and West. The region established trade links with China, East Turkestan, Western Asia, Rome and South Africa. Historians assume that the population of Fergana was reaching at least 500,000 people. They worshipped forces of nature, the sun and fire. They took special care of their horses. In 105 BC, the Han dynasty, a powerful state of that time, sent its envoy Chelin to Fergana with the intention to get their thoroughbred horses. Paganians refused to sell horses and even killed the ambassador for his offensive and disrespectful behavior toward the local elders. In 104 BC, the Han Emperor Yu sent a 6,000 army to Davan. This army was defeated in Fergana. Few of those who survived managed to escape.
Китайский дипломат Жан Цян описывает вот как раз о небесных конях, пишет, что у Фергане имеются такие лошади, которые нигде не такие. Они происходили из небесах. Это небесные кони, летающие, как будто у них есть крылья. И вот они, когда вот скачут, просто это как летает. И еще после скачки они потеют кровью.
Chinese diplomat Zhang Zan wrote about heavenly horses. He wrote that in Fergana there were such horses which could be found only there. They were of heavenly origin. These horses fly as if they had wings. When they gallop, it is like they are soaring into the skies. He wrote that after the ride, they sweat with blood. Researchers gave this statement a lot of thought. It seems impossible for horses to be sweating with blood. In the 19th century, the European traveler Burns was traveling in Central Asia and in southern Turkmenistan came across the Hal-Tekke horses. These Hal-Tekke horses are the descendants of those Fergana horses. This is how we interpret it these days.
Сам себя, вот, например, предохраняет, чтобы не случился внезапно какой-то случай. Обычно, когда или очень долгой скачкой и изнасиливает какой-то очень сильный, заставляет лошадь, после этого лошадь иногда могут умереть, падать, умереть. Они, чтобы вот это не случилось, лошадь сам себя сохраняет. Вот. И пускает вот кровь.
Davan owns high mountains. There are horses in these mountains that are impossible to get. This is why five-colored, that is, bright dams, are chosen and let out at the foot of the mountains to mate with the mountain stallions. The colts out of those dams sweat with blood and therefore called celestial breed of horses. Zhang Zan Chinese traveler and diplomat. These horses were extremely strong and had great stamina. They were also believed to sweat with blood, which for Chinese was a sign of their divine origins. They considered them celestial horses which could get the rider to the land of immortality. The Chinese Emperor Wu Di, who was searching for ways to become immortal, was desperate to get celestial horses. These horses were worshipped in China, and even poets wrote odes about them. In 102 BC, the Chinese started their second campaign against the Davan State. 60,000 infantrymen and 30,000 cavalrymen descended into the valley through the Alai Mountains, and a bloody battle began. King Mughal was killed in the battle. The siege of the city of Yershi lasted for 40 days. The city of Yu demonstrated a fierce resistance. The Chinese failed to break the resistance of this state and conquer it. The foundation of the state consisted of 3 rural community members. In war times, they were recruited as irregulars of up to 60,000 people armed with bows and spears. They used slave labor, but slavery was more of a household nature, since rural community played the main role in production. Dawan's economy was based on irrigated agriculture. Members of communities cultivated rice, wheat, cotton, alfalfa and grapes, from which they made fine wine.
Один такой талантливый дипломат Жан Цян,
The talented Chinese diplomat Jiang Zhan visited Fergana. He got to northern Bactria. During his visit in Fergana, he was writing everything down. After 10 years, he returned to China and presented his report to the Chinese emperor. Based on this report, they wrote the first historical book, Shitzi. The author of this book is historian Sima Zhang. He wrote that there were more than 70 cities in Fergana. At first he mentioned 2 of them, and later, in another source, Hanshu, he mentioned 2 more cities. All in all, 4 cities were mentioned. Yuan was one of them. They translated local names into Chinese. The city of Fergana was translated as Yuan, which means a city surrounded by mountains. In order to track the difference between concepts of city and valley, state, they used 2 hieroglyphs: Dayuan, Big Fergana, and Fergana. That is how they knew the difference.
Дайюан – это большая Фергана. И Фергана. Так они различали.
The kingdom contains 60,000 families, comprising a population of 300,000. The regions around Dayuan make wine out of grapes, the wealthy inhabitants keeping as much as 10,000 or more pickles stored away. It can be kept for several years without spoiling. The people loved their wine, and the horses loved their alfalfa. Jiang Zhan, Chinese traveler and diplomat. There were up to 70 large and small cities in Fergana. The Dayuan, who were the heirs of the Chustian, preserved the oasis character of the settlement. Most of them lived in small villages and homesteads, which, as archaeological excavations revealed, were well fortified and could withstand enemy invasions.
Мы уже об этом говорили, но это очень важно.
We have already spoken about this, but it is very important. The Council of Elders, which in historical sources is called Guijen, played a significant role in the Davan State administration. It included eminent and respected people of the country. The Council of Elders supervised the authority of the ruler, could remove or even kill him, made major decisions in state policy up to the most important issues of war and peace, establishing or breaking off diplomatic relations. The Davan State was the union of cities or oasis states which had a city as its center. Jan Tsan mentions it when discussing similarities between political structures of Davan and Dahas, Bactria, both of which didn't have supreme ruler and where almost every city had its own ruler. In the later period, another author, Xuan Zhan, 7th century, provided similar report on political structure in Fergana.
А Фергане пишет, что вот там 70 городов.
He wrote that there were 70 cities in Fergana and that the locals are skilled horsemen. Women are equal to men. They fight their enemies alongside men. Women are highly respected by men. If a wife wants something, the husband never refuses. Meaning, he was writing about the social equality of men and women. And it was more than 2,000 years ago.
Мужчин и женщин. Вот такие вот известия есть. И это больше 2000 лет тому назад.
Although the states from Dawan west to Angsi, Persia, speak rather different languages, their customs are generally similar and their languages mutually intelligible. The men all have deep-set eyes and profuse beards and whiskers. They are skillful at commerce and will haggle over a fraction of a cent. Women are held in great respect, and the men make decisions on the advice of their women. Zhang Tsan, Chinese traveler and diplomat. The state was notable for its highly developed economy. The main activity of the population was in agriculture. They cultivated rice, wheat, grapes, cotton, alfalfa. Grape wine produced by local winemakers could be stored for a long time without losing its properties. Local varieties of rice were considered the best in all of the Central Asia of that time.
Уже в середине первого тысячелетия до нашей эры
In the middle of the first millennium BC, there was already a centralized power that could mobilize people to build new irrigation canals. By that time, there were dozens of canals already. This proves that the main part of irrigation canals was built in the eastern part of the Fergana Valley.
Именно на восточной части Ферганской долины.
Скорее всего, в Даване не имела места эксплуатация рабов на государственном уровне.
Most likely, there was no slaves exploitation at state level in Dawan, but there was social stratification as well as state ownership and private property. The fact that some wealthy families stored several thousand tons of wine, 1 ton is equal to 100 kilograms, it's unlikely that one family could produce and consume such a large amount of beverage on its own. The language used by dominant ethnic groups of the local sedentary population was close to the dead languages of Sogdian and Parthian ethnosis. Parts of the Proto-Turkic peoples also inhabited this area. The total number of cities and towns in this densely populated region reached 70. Agriculture was very advanced.
Прототюркские этносы, которые впоследствии стали частью местных тюркоязычных народов.
In the end of the 2nd century, in the 1st century BC, at the beginning of our era, there was a report about Fergana being a prosperous agricultural country. In this report, the first diplomat, Zhang Tsan, wrote about sweet berries. The Chinese were not familiar with grapes back then. very sweet ones, and that people were making beverage out of these berries. He meant wine. Wealthy people store it in huge amounts, 5, 6, 8 tons in their cellars and trade it. They consume this drink all the time, in the morning and in the evening. This refers to natural wine. It has small alcohol content and it has very pleasant taste. He wrote about this as well. After reading this report, the Chinese emperor ordered to bring these berries, grapes, to China. They planted it in a certain area near his palace. They also planted clover, alfalfa, for feeding horses. There was no alfalfa, lucerne, anywhere at that time. Nowadays, in the Fergana Valley, for example in the Aravan Valley, in the valley of the Agbura River, I saw wild alfalfa, clover, with my own eyes.
Там растут дикий люцерн, клевер.
Most likely, the country was governed by dividing the territory into cities and oases. According to Chinese sources, the ruler of the city of Yuchen, near modern Uzgen, refused to supply the provisions to the Chinese army. This example proves that every city and oasis had its own ruler.
Даванское государство имело своего правителя, однако не все.
The Davan State had its ruler, but not all important decisions were made by this ruler. There was also a council of elders, and the most important issues were put to a vote of these elders. Even the questions of peace and war with neighboring states and the fate of the ruler himself were in hands of the council of elders.
Или даже судьба самого правителя была в руках именно Совета старейшин.
During the Han Dynasty, Shi's lands stretched to Dawan's northern borders. In the north they stretched to Kangyu, in the south to the Yuezhi state. Chinese historical sources. Throughout its history, this state has never been part of large empires and powerful states. It preserved its political freedom. The Fergana Valley remained uninvolved during the invasions of the Iranian Achaemenids in the 4th, 6th centuries BC and the expansion of Alexander the Great. There is also no evidence about the Seleucids' raids into the valley.
Таким образом, государство Давань или Фергана...
The Dawan Fergana state existed since the 4th century BC and was a kingdom based on its governing principles. Agriculture and cattle breeding were highly developed in Dawan. Agriculture was based on artificial irrigation. According to the material culture of that era, the high level of development of different crafts led to the flourishment of urban culture in Dawan.
Сооружение ирригационных каналов позволяет не просто освоить новые земли, но уже это дает возможность.
Construction of irrigation canals was not only aimed at developing new lands. It boosts urbanization, meaning stimulates construction of new settlements. If we talk about channels like Shahrihan Sai and Andijan Sai, we'll see structures along these channels.
Вдоль этих каналов каждые 3-4 километра сооружается крепость, замок. И вокруг него...
Every 3 to 4 kilometers a fortress or castle was built. New settlements emerged around them. We must deepen researches of the period of the middle of the first millennium, because these studies could help us find out when the Fergana statehood of Davan was actually formed.
Могут помочь нам показать, когда сформировалась ферганская государственность Давань.
If the Davan statehood appeared later, then the Davan state was formed on the basis of a state that is still unknown to science.
сформировано на основе какого-то государства, которое еще неизвестен науке.
The Great Silk Road was formed in heydays of this state. In this intercontinental trade, on the route from the borders of eastern Sogdiana to the Chinese Empire of the Tang epoch, Fergana provided security, food, fodder, pack animals, as well as interpreters and guides. The state of Daiwan had an impact on further development of Fergana.
Мы установили, что вот так называемые дамасской стали, основном одним из родин был.
We have established that Fergana is one of the birthplaces of the so-called Damascus steel. It was created here in Askent. More than 70 hectares of land were occupied for this production. During the excavation, we found the waste of this production everywhere. Layers of waste, 2 to 15 meters high. They didn't just throw it out. First, they would dig a ditch, even it out, and then cover it with boards, wood. First, to preserve cleanliness. Secondly, this waste could be used to restore the production. They didn't reveal the secret of production. The most difficult task was to get a pure bulat, Damascus steel. We know that in Russia, in the middle of the 19th century, Anosov, the famous metallurgist and a great scientist, was able to get it for the first time. He solved the secret of creating Damascus steel in the middle of the 19th century. But it was the hard Damascus steel. But here in Fergana, they were producing both hard and soft bulat, Damascus steel. They used this steel to make blades, various weapons, and sold them. In the west, from Damascus to the Mediterranean, in the east, up to China.
У нас есть известие, даже в раннем Средневековье, даже раньше, Фергана снабжал, например, тибетцев, вот когда тибетцы с китайцами воевали, тибетцев снаряжением.
They used silk and lacquer, but the casting of coins and vessels was formerly unknown. Later, some of the Chinese poor people ran away and surrendered to the people of Daiwan and taught them how to cast metal and manufacture weapons. Jian Zan, Chinese traveler and diplomat. Ancient terracotta figurines, which were discovered in the Fergana Valley, proved that the local population worshipped female goddesses cults, like the cult of fertility, the sun, as well as animalistic cult. A cult of horses, which were referred to as heavenly in the ancient sources, had a special place among them.
До 70-80-х годов 20-го столетия основным, конечно, источником были это китайские летописи, в которых указывалось четко, что именно в 485 году...
Until the 70s and 80s of the 20th century, the main sources were Chinese chronicles, which indicated clearly that the year of 485 was the end of the Davan dynasty. That is, it quits the stage of history, giving the way to the Turkic Khaganate.
Когда мы говорим о Фергане, такое ощущение, что Ферганская долина была каким-то очень близким экуменом именно для кочевых государств Центральной Азии.
There is only fragmentary information about the Davan state in the first centuries AD. Presumably, in 105 years AD, it was under the rule of powerful Kushan state. It is known that in 437, the Paganians sent their envoy to the small Chinese kingdom Wei. After a certain period of time, Davan was conquered by the Hettalites, who came from the west, and in the 6th century, Fergana was subjugated by the Turks.